it's Hailey, and today I'm going to be talking about all of the classics that are on my TBR pile. This video is kindly sponsored by St. Martin's Press and is inspired by the Jane Austen Society by Natalie Jenner, which is coming out May 26th and available for pre-order now. So I will have a link down below where you guys can pre-order it. This book sounds so good. So it is about all of these characters just after World War II who live in this small English village called Chawton, and it's actually the final home of Jane Austen. But it's been so many years and now her legacy is dwindling, but all of these different characters, a laborer, a doctor, a young widow, and many, many more who have nothing in common otherwise, but have their love of Jane Austen in common, come together to try and save her legacy and her final home. I have been super into historical fiction, especially lately, but it's also just one of my favorite genres all around, and a lot of my favorite books are historical fiction, and I also love classics, and Jane Austen in particular. So when I heard about this book, I was automatically interested in it, and I can't wait to read it. So you can pre-order the book now, so you make sure you can get your copy on May 26th. I think this is going to be a very emotional and moving story, but I'm definitely excited for it, and I hope you are too. Now, since that book is devoted to classics and an author of classic literature, I wanted to talk about my love of classics. I majored in English, so I have read quite a few classics in my day, but there are still a lot that I haven't read yet. I'm actually filming this in the living room, which is where all my classics live. So I'm sorry if it's echoey. This room isn't really made for filming, but I felt like it was much easier for me not to just lug all these books upstairs because a lot of them are very heavy. There's a spider on the ceiling. Anyways, I often talk about my TBR pile of YA books and more modern recent releases, but I never include classics in that number. And the reason for that is I like to take my time with them and I don't want to rush myself to read them. I feel like for some reason I like to put them on their own little list where it's kind of my lifetime reading list. I don't think that really makes sense to anyone but me, but in my brain it does make sense, so whatever. That being said, because I don't really prioritize classics because I'm like, I have a whole lifetime to read them, I have a lot that I haven't read yet, a ton that I own that I haven't gotten the chance to get to yet. So that's going to be what I'm talking about in today's video. So without further ado, let's get into the classics that I haven't read yet. So first up is This Side of Paradise and Other Classic Works by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I have read The Great Gatsby and really enjoyed it, but I haven't read anything else by this author. So in here we have This Side of Paradise, The Beautiful and Damned, Flappers and Philosophers, and Tales of the Jazz Age. So just a bunch of fun 1920s stories. I'm imagining they're all 1920s themed. If they're not, I will be kind of disappointed. So this right here is the reason that I wanted to film this video right at these shelves, because all these books are so heavy and I just felt like that was gonna be a nightmare. So here I have a pile of fairy tales and other kind of related things that I haven't gotten to yet. So we have Aesop's Illustrated Fables. I've read a couple of them here and there. The Arabian Nights, translated by Sir Richard F. Burton. This one, I don't think I've read anything from it. I need to put these down or else I'm going to drop things. Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales by the Brothers Grimm. I have read quite a few of these. I was reading it at one point, but I ended up putting it down and never got the chance to finish it. And that is the same for Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales. I read a couple and just didn't get the chance to finish. And then I also have Beauty and the Beast and other classic fairy tales. So this is just kind of a compilation of a bunch of different fairy tales that separated into Beauty and Beast. So one's about like beautiful people and things, and then the other half is about different creatures and beasts and stuff. So it's all different authors, but definitely haven't gotten through all of these. And also Fairy Tales from Around the World by Andrew Lang. I don't think I've read any of these. I probably have without knowing, but I definitely haven't actually like picked up this specific copy and tried to read it. War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. I mentioned recently that I haven't gotten the chance to read yet. It's super big and like, oh, this font. Literally every time I open this book I want to scream because the font is so small. So I feel like this is probably one that I'll have to do the audiobook for to be able to get through, or like kind of section it off and make it a side read that I'm doing. The Complete Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I don't think I've read any Sherlock Holmes stories before. I think my dad read them actually because he's really into mysteries, and I'm not super into mysteries, but I feel like classic, iconic ones like these I would probably like. Dracula by Bram Stoker, I keep on meaning to read like every Halloween and I just never get around to it. Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte is definitely one that it really surprises me that I haven't gotten around to yet. I'm having so many hair issues right now, like my hair can't decide which side it wants to go on. Struggles. Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. I feel like I've heard from a lot of people that they had to read this for school and it was like their least favorite book, but I feel like I still should at least try reading it. Also, it has brown edges, which I don't think I've ever seen a book with brown edges. The Odyssey by Homer. This is definitely a book that intimidates me because like it's really, really old and I feel like the language is going to confuse me, but I do still think, I feel like, you know, as an English major, as a writer, it is something that I should read. The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. I have read Huckleberry Finn, but I have not read this one. Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. So I have read 2 Dickens books and I feel like they're both of his shortest. I've read A Christmas Carol and I've read Oliver Twist, and both of them I did like. This one though, this is no short book. The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I haven't read any of Oscar Wilde's plays or anything, but this story just sounds so intriguing to me, like knowing the concept of it with the painting and everything. I don't know why I haven't tried it yet. The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Definitely a really iconic story and one that I would like to get around to soon. The Swiss Family Robinson by Johann David Weiss. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, I apologize. A Journey to the Center of the Earth and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. I'm trying to get to all the children's classics that I possibly can, and I feel like I've read way more children's classics than I have just general adult classics, because I mean that is kind of what I specialized in school, particularly Victorian era sort of children's classics, but for some reason I never got the chance to read these. The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood by Howard Pyle. I feel like I kind of want to read this and then watch Disney's Robin Hood. I feel like that would be a good time. Pinocchio by Carlo Collodi. This would be another good one to read this and then watch the adaptation. I feel like they're both like completely different, but still it might be kind of fun. Also, this is gonna sound super dumb, but for some reason I always thought Pinocchio, which I feel like I've seen like once in my lifetime, I thought it was German until I went to Italy, and then there was all this Pinocchio stuff when I was in Florence and I was like, why is Pinocchio everywhere? And then I realized it's Italian, so that was a dumb moment on my part. The Call of the Wild by Jack London. This is one where I would say I would read it and then watch. There's a recent adaptation that came out with, is it with Harrison Ford? I don't even remember, but I don't think I will ever watch that adaptation because dogs and bad things happening to animals, it just doesn't mix with me. I think that's the one I'm thinking of. I feel like I always get this book mixed up with another book, but I can't remember which book because I always get them mixed up. So speaking of Jane Austen, I actually haven't read all of her books yet, but it is something that I really want to work on, and I kind of think that I want to do maybe a week-long readathon sort of thing where I just read Jane Austen, because I think I want to reread the books of hers that I already have read, like particularly Pride and Prejudice. I feel like I want to read that one again, but I do have 3 here that I haven't read yet. So I have Persuasion, Emma, which I think is the one that interests me the most, especially with the recent adaptation that came out, and then Mansfield Park. Other than that, I have read all of her works and I've really enjoyed all of them, but I feel like I kind of save these and save them for the perfect time, but when is the perfect time? Now. The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. I have read only Jane Eyre by the Brontes. As you saw, I haven't read Wuthering Heights. Maybe I have to have a Bronte weekend too. Now finally for this shelf, I have a whole other shelf there to get to, which I feel like is going to be even worse than this one, but I've got a bunch of Shakespeare. I also have the complete works of Shakespeare down there, so basically the complete works of Shakespeare, but the ones that I own individually here, I have Much Ado About Nothing, I have Henry the, I can't read Roman numerals right now, is that 4th, part 1, and the 6th, part 2, and then Henry the 8th, yeah, I don't know why I just had a blank moment with the Roman numerals. Then I have Coriolanus and Twelfth Night. Twelfth Night I feel like is the one that, like, I tend to enjoy the comedies more than I do the tragedies. I haven't read any of the histories yet, but Twelfth Night I feel like is the one that I want to read soon. The Comedy of Errors, Love Labour's Lost, and We Are Back at the Beginning. So these are all the ones that I own individually that I'd like to get to eventually, and I will listen to them because that's the way that I enjoy consuming Shakespeare, is just listening to them, because then then they are performed like a play. Next over from the big shelf is Songs of Innocence and of Experience by William Blake. I have read quite a few of the poems in here in my day. I read so many of them. I feel like there are so many classes that I took in university where we had to read these, but I did really enjoy studying them, so I would like to read the entire compilation of poetry. And honestly, this would take me not very long, like they're short poems, so I really should just sit down one day and do it. Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. Once again, probably said that wrong, but I tried my best. Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. Like I said, I've got a lot of Dickens on my TBR because they get so big and it's just very intimidating. To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. I think this is the only Virginia Woolf book that I actually own, to be honest, because I'm not super into mysteries, but I don't even know if this is her most well-known. I know it was a bargain book, so I picked it up. Charlotte's Web by E.B. White, which is definitely gonna make me cry, and once again, animals like being hurt or anything, not that they're hurt, but I don't know, it's gonna be sad, and I know that. The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. Actually, now that I think about it, I have read Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, but I don't actually own a copy, and that is a heartbreaking book, let me tell you. Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne. This is a story that I grew up watching all the Disney stuff for it, and I love Winnie the Pooh so much. My mom loves Winnie the Pooh so much, and I really do love it. So I would absolutely love reading this story, especially because I haven't seen anything Winnie the Pooh in so long, but I think it would be so fun to read it and actually see the source material for it. Mary Poppins by P.L. Travers. This is actually a pretty recent addition to my collection because I remembered not liking Mary Poppins, but then I don't know if I actually never liked it or I just didn't like it as a kid. I do want to rewatch it, but I watched Mary Poppins Returns when it came out and I enjoyed that one thoroughly. So then I was like, I feel like I will enjoy Mary Poppins, and now I'm giving it a second chance. Really, it was probably just me as a kid not wanting to watch it once, but my family did, so I was like, no, I don't like it, so then we wouldn't watch it because I was a brat. Now next is a book that is almost as iconic on my TBR piles as I don't know what, but it's been on so many TBR piles, and that is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. As I've said a million times before, I literally have met Margaret Atwood. Like, this is a personalized, signed copy, but I haven't read it yet. I haven't seen the TV show or anything because I want to read it before watching the TV show, and now there's a sequel, and I've had so much time to read it, and it's such a Canadian iconic classic, but I'm a terrible Canadian apparently because I haven't read it yet. The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man and Dubliners by James Joyce. These are stories that I've read. I think I've read excerpts of Dubliners when I was in university, but I don't think I've ever read any of this before. Back to the big old chunky Russian novels. Next is Anna Karenina, which I have no clue what it's about, but I know that there's a retelling that came out recently that I'm super interested in, so maybe that will push this higher to the top of my TBR. I mean, at least it is huge, but at least the font isn't that small. That is a saving grace. How many pages is it actually? 959. So I have actually read bigger books than this, but I think the funniest part is when I was just looking at that, it shows the chapter and it's 18 chapters. Was it part 8, chapter 18. That's more acceptable. Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell, which is one of my friend's favorite books, and I definitely need to read it before watching the adaptation, and she has made that very clear, and I do agree because I really want to read it. So I actually have the last stack from that other bookshelf here. I thought I had way more books on that shelf that I hadn't read yet, but it turns out I have read most of them. Also, Harry Potter takes up a huge chunk of that shelf, so it's not as bad as I previously thought, although there are still a lot of classics that I have on this TBR. But let's get back to it with that little intermission there. Wow, my hair. Pippi Longstocking by Astrid Lindgren. I want to read Pippi Longstocking because I feel like it could surprise me, even though whatever adaptation I watched as a kid I didn't like. I feel like now I might enjoy it. It might be an Anne of Green Gables situation where I didn't really like the adaptation growing up, but now I love it, and I also love the original book, so I want to give it another chance. This next one I don't know if I've actually ever read before, but it's Black Beauty by Anna Sewell. I know that I watched the movie as a kid. I don't know if I ever finished it. I was horse girl as a child. I loved horses, was obsessed with them, and I know that this was sad, so I don't know if I ever actually finished watching the movie. It's like The Last Unicorn I don't think I ever finished watching because it just made me sad. I was very sensitive as a child, but Maybe I have the maturity and the emotional maturity to get through this now. Probably not. I'll just skip over the sad parts. The Jungle Book and Just So Stories by Rudyard Kipling. I would love to read The Jungle Book and rewatch The Jungle Book. I've never seen the live action adaptation, and it's one of those Disney movies that I remember, but very vaguely, so it would be nice to read it and then see how it compares. I know like they're not going to compare, but I just like doing that. I think it's fun. A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. I feel like this is the Dickens novel that interests me the most, to be honest. I don't know if it's like the revolution thing. I'm not exactly sure, but I do know that I feel like this will probably be the next one of his that I pick up. Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This I picked up after Hannah read it, I believe. I think she read it. It must have been her, but she really liked it. So then I was like, we'll give it a go. I had no clue what it was about, but now I know it's like a ghost story, so I'll save it for around Halloween. Animal Farm by George Orwell. I have read 1984, but I've never read this one, which is kind of funny because this is so short and would take me like no time at all to read, but what do you know? And finally is Ella Enchanted by Gail Carson Levine, which I feel like is kind of more of a modern classic. It's like, I consider Harry Potter a classic, even though it's more modern, but I love the movie for Ella Enchanted, which I'm sure is very different, but I was actually just watching The Princess Diaries, which the connection there is Anne Hathaway, if you didn't know, but such great times. So that's all for my classics TBR pile. I feel like it's not as bad as I expected, which is really great, but it also kind of has motivated me to want to build my classics collection a little bit more. I feel like I have been very focused on getting new books to add to my never-ending like upstairs library and that never-ending TBR pile, but I feel like it would be nice to continue to collect some classics. I have gotten some more of these ones recently, but there's so many editions out there that I just want to collect them all. Actually, you know where all my classics money has been going? It has been going to the 96 copies of Alice in Wonderland I have. I don't know why I was acting like that was a mystery. Like, wow. So that's going to be all for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to check out The Jane Austen Society by Natalie Jenner, which is coming out May 26th, but it is available for pre-order now, so I'll have a link down below. And thank you very much to St. Martin's Press for sponsoring today's video. I think what I might actually do is have my little Jane Austen readathon and then read this book at the end of the week. That sounds beautiful. That sounds like just a good time. So I don't know when I will do that, maybe a little bit closer to the release date, but I think that might be some fun. But please let me know what classics are at the top of your TBR if you like reading classics, if you don't. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video and I will see you in the next one. Bye!